Hello, welcome to my channel. I am Pavithra, this is Belly, and you're watching Kodmad Reads Preact. In this series, I have been reading the codebase of Preact. With every new episode, I get deeper and deeper into it. This is going to be the last episode, and we are just going to be finishing up the series by reading how the diffing algorithm works. Let's get into it. So in the last episode, we went through the base component class. It was pretty interesting and pretty easy and straightforward code as far as I was concerned. We learned what the component has, we learned how a set state and a force update works, which is pretty cool, and it has its own render component function which does the diffing again at any point when a set state occurs. In this episode, we will get back into the diff function. In the diff function, we can get back into the diff function. While referring to our pseudocode, we had this code where if it is a virtual node, then we do a bunch of stuff. If not, that is if it is a div or a span or a button or any HTML node, then we are going to call diff element nodes. So if it is a virtual node, we create the component, we do its lifecycle stuff. If it is the first render, we do all the mount stuff. If not, we do all the receive props and should component update. And then we call the diff children method over this virtual node. So today we will be focusing on this diff children and diff element nodes method. So let's get started with diff children. So in diff children, what happens is, where is diff children? So diff children is called here after the render function is called. So in diff children, so one of the things about diff children that I wanted to note was diff children has the same function call, function signature. Diff children has the same function signature as the diff function itself. It takes the same set of parameters and I don't know, let's see what it does. Okay, so diff the children of a virtual node. Yeah, I was right about my virtual node condition there. So it takes parent DOM, children are being diffed, parent virtual node, old parent virtual node who's like which is being diffed against a new parent. Then there's the context object, there's the SVG boolean, there is excess DOM children. This has been, excess DOM children is still a bit hazy to me, but I think excess DOM children are the DOM nodes that are outside of the parent in which we are diffing. Commit queue is the component which have callbacks that need to be invoked later. The old DOM is the current DOM, and maybe we need to add the new DOM into that. And is hydrating is a boolean to show if we are hydrating on top of something that was SSR'd or we are creating whole new DOM. I found the code for diff children a little confusing and full of conditions. I spent a ton of time trying to understand it. The treatment of refs, DOM children creation, old node comparison, etc. were a little messy and they sent me around in circles. Also, my keyboard was really close to the mic and the whole time they made a lot of clicky clacky sounds that were louder than my voice even at times. Anyway, here is a time lapse of me trying to figure out the code by just reading it. I don't think I succeeded a lot, and after about 40 to 50 minutes, I kind of gave up on this method where I usually write comments or pseudocode and understand what's going on. I decided that I might understand this method better if I move over to a sample app and look at this, inspect this over my Chrome debugger, and you'll see me doing just that after this. To learn better through debugging, I created my own little component that had a little bit of set state action going on so that I could debug the re-renders. I think I'm totally spoiled by hooks in React. I absolutely struggle to create a class component here. So much so that I forgot to bind my click handler to the this scope and pulled a Dan Abramov here, but infinitely less cooler. Once I got my component working, I started putting in debug points at strategic places in the library code and spent some time inspecting each call to the various diff functions, that is the diff children, and diff element nodes. It's always a little tedious to step through recursive functions, but during this process, I could very clearly make out the depth first nature of the algorithm. It first processed the h1 tag around the word hello and then the text hello itself, and then got into my custom component to render the first button and then the link and so on. On toggling the link, it was pretty cool to see how the diff algorithm compared the two nodes, that is the old node and the new node, and updated the DOM for the changed link and text only. So yeah, this process kind of helped solidify my understanding of the diff. Though I'm not sure I hit all the edge cases, I got a pretty good idea of how the happy path works. So for reference, as I was learning Preact, I kind of made these flowcharts which correspond to my understanding of how the render function works, and this is my understanding of how the whole diffing algorithm works. I'll try to maybe I'll frame this as a piece of art I made. But since this is quite illegible, I'll try to convert this into a nice flowchart in Excalibur, and we'll see how that goes.
1, 2, 3, funk it.
Here we start with the representation of the diff function. The diff function, as soon as it is called, the first thing on its mind is to check if the current node that it has received is a virtual node or not. If it is a virtual node, it will be a Preact object. If not, it will be a string like div or span. So if it's a virtual node, it will create the base component class for it, and then it will run it through all of the lifecycle hooks that are present within the component. If it is rendering for the first time, then mount, otherwise update and should component update and so on. So once it's done the life cycle stuff, it checks if it has any more children and calls diff children on those on that array of children. The diff children goes through each of the child element and checks if that child element can produce a DOM object. If it cannot, then it clearly has more virtual nodes to process within itself, so it calls the diff function again, which does this whole thing recursively. If it can produce any DOM, then it kind of builds and creates this DOM object. Clearly, I was confused about what it does, so I went back and forth to check what happens. On a child component, and then it goes back and processes the next child. So if it is not a virtual node, if it is a div or a span, then the diff function calls the diff element nodes function here. The diff element node usually just goes through and finds out what the actual node is. Is it a text node? Is it a tag? Does it have to be appended to its parents? So it creates that bit of DOM. It compares if the props are different. If it is a re-render, it compares with the old prop and new prop by calling diff props, as I'm checking here. And if it can build any DOM, it builds that and appends to the parent, after which it checks if that element has more children. If it does, then it calls diff children, which iterates through each of the child, and it may or may not call diff. If there are no more children, then it is done and it returns the created DOM to whoever called diff element nodes. One thing that the diff function is always checking is to finish its job. So it checks if all of the DOM has been created. If yes, then it returns that DOM. If not, it goes back and checks if it's a virtual node or not and continues the diffing algorithm here. That's a wrap on Kodmad Reads Preact. I had a lot of fun making this project, and I hope the small amount of people who did watch all of the episodes enjoyed themselves and learned something from it too. My main takeaways from this whole project were one, open source maintainers really love feedback on their project. So the least you can do to contribute to open source is actually read the code and tell them what you think of it. The whole Preact team was the whole Preact team received my project really well. They were really supportive of it. Special shout out to Marvin, who actually watched each of my episodes, gave me feedback, and then proceeded to update Preact documentation as well. This amplified my efforts tenfold, as this knowledge will reach a lot more people, right? That made me really happy. I also learned a lot about making YouTube videos in general. It takes a lot of work. It's you have to record the actual video, you have to edit them, there may be voiceovers, you have to make little graphics. To make it more interactive, you have to create a thumbnail. That was such a challenge for me. I think I somehow have got how to create the thumbnail, but yeah, there's a lot of scope for improvement. Also, this project taught me a lot about being consistent. This is, I think, one of the first projects that I have consistently uploaded, consistently worked on, and in a somewhat sustainable manner. I pre-recorded a lot of the videos, which helped me push them out really fast. In the beginning, I thought I could upload twice a week, but then I realized that once a week on Tuesdays is the best time for me to upload. It's given me a lot of confidence to continue with my YouTube channel and possibly grow it throughout of this year. I'm going to be making more videos. I have a few stuff planned, which I hope you will like. My upload schedule is going to be Tuesday of every week. Let's see how much I can keep that up. So yeah, stay tuned for more videos and see you next week.